Hello, Unlocked listeners. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to take a second to point out that we recorded all of these conversations immediately after the pandemic hit. And little did we know that that change was just getting started. There have been so many inflection points that have happened since and are still happening around us every day. And as vacation rental leaders, one of the things that makes you special is your ability to problem solve and to do the right thing. And when necessary, to ask new questions in order to reach a new future. If you take away anything from this special episode with Michelle Williams, I challenge you to identify the one thing you are really concerned about, one challenge you just don't yet know how to solve, and to discuss it with your spouse or your team member or even just a friend, not in an attempt to actually get all the answers written down on paper, but rather to begin kind of a process of discovery. Now is the time for holistic problem solvers to pull back all of these layers and really get to the roots of our problems. I think you all have it inside of you. Hey Unlocked listeners, this episode's brought to you by Point Central, the leader in business-grade smart property solutions designed for rental properties. Point Central's technology helps you increase property safety, reduce operational costs, and improve guest satisfaction. Head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. And Rental Guardian. With over 1 million property owners, thousands of property managers, hundreds of software partners and counting, Rental Guardian is arguably the most complete and trusted travel and damage protection platform in the industry. You can learn more at rentalguardian.com. And Breezeway. Breezeway's operations platform makes it easy to ensure quality, safety, and cleanliness across your properties so you can deliver an amazing guest experience every time. Head over to breezeway.io to learn more. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hola,
Great.
Mateo.
That's right. Soy Mateo. In fact, a lot of Inner Circle members refer to me as Mateo as well. Before we begin today's episode, have I passed my Zencastr health check?
Yes, you have, Matt. You are 5x5 coming through loud and clear all the way down here in the tropics. Radio Mango Fish.
Okay. That's what I was hoping. And for those who don't know Zencastr, it's the software we use to record these virtual interviews. And whenever I log on and it does this health check, I suddenly get very nervous, like that I'm not going to pass. It makes me anxious. So I'm really glad to hear that I passed the health check. Of course, it's for my microphone and my internet speed. Today's podcast interview is with a pretty brilliant woman in our industry who has so many responsibilities. Tammy, in listening to this interview, what about Michelle's leadership kind of gets you excited?
I believe it's a very important moment for people in leadership roles to speak to the community. There are a lot of vacation rental managers and property owners sitting in their homes trying to figure out what's happening, what's coming next. And hearing from leadership right now is what can give them that extra push.
Yeah, comfort even. I mean, I like the idea. We talk to so many hyper-local groups, hyper-local companies, so many granular kind of vacation rental businesses across the United States. I like talking to the VRMA people because it does make me feel like there's one somewhat unifying alliance for all the vacation rentals in the United States, somebody standing up and fighting for them. So I'm always enjoying these interviews. And to have you talking to Michelle about the challenge the industry faces right now, I think this is a really important podcast.
I actually didn't really plan it, but when I got on the phone with Michelle, I realized that there's no better person to scrap the normal interview format and talk about just some things that have been on my mind, some concerns or insurmountable challenges about our industry, at least that I haven't got my head around just yet. Did you guys think the format worked from a listener's perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very excited to kind of dismiss the usual and dive right into the challenge the industry has to face.
Yeah, these are complicated conversations. A lot of times you don't know who you can have them with. So it's very rewarding to know that, hey, this is the truth. Yes, that is not going to get easier anytime soon. So people better listen. Shoot an email to Michelle and see if there's anything else that she can help you with.
Yeah, she not only has great ideas, but she also has a plan for the ideas, and she has the ability to communicate the plan, which is like the trifecta in my leadership book. So with that, should we just hit play? Michelle Williams is the general manager of Atlantic Vacation Homes in Massachusetts. She's also the chairperson of the VRHP Council, which is now actually a committee, basically a committee on steroids of the VRMA. Michelle's also a board member of VRMA itself. And today we're going to have a different kind of episode. Today we're going to talk about some of the more challenging issues facing our industry, some of the things that I don't often talk about. Not expecting Michelle to have all the answers, but I do know with Michelle's experience, we'll have some interesting discoveries. Michelle Williams, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
You're a major pod queen these days. I was just browsing through my podcast feed and I saw that you were on Tim and Sarah's pod.
I was, yeah. And we did one for VRMA Arrival podcast. So this is number 3.
Oh my gosh. I feel so like behind the curve. And that podcast with Tim and Sarah, by the way, was fantastic. And I'd recommend that anybody who's listening to this and is intrigued by what Michelle has to say, go listen to that, because it covers so much of the minutia about cleaning and the future of vacation rentals in this new world. And I don't want to double up on all of that because I think you did such a beautiful job articulating it all to Sarah and Tim. So do head on over. We'll include that in the show notes. Before we begin here, Michelle, because we are in such a weird time, I'd like to ask, what is a normal day like for you? Are you in normal routine mode or are you in strange quarantine woman mode?
We're in kind of a hybrid. I am working from home for the most part. Every now and then might be something I need to go into the office for. Our company is short-term rentals, vacation rentals, but also long-term rentals and real estate. So under the real estate portion of the business, we are an essential business, although short-term rentals are currently not happening in Massachusetts, supposedly until Monday. We'll see if that changes. But mostly working at home, lots of Zoom meetings, pretty much in my little den on the computer all day long.
Has this challenged your skills in any ways? I'm finding that I am like really being tested in certain ways, specifically technologically.
For me personally, it hasn't really been that bad. My career background before I moved into the vacation rental space was tech, so it's not too bad for me.
What were you doing in tech?
Internet consulting.
Oh.
UX strategy and design.
Wow, that sounds deep. And where was that being done from?
So I worked for a few different companies, some like creative agencies, digital agencies, and also some sort of client side. So, some in Boston, some in the greater suburbs of Boston.
Okay. And so what was the process of coming to Atlantic Vacation Homes? Did they spring it on you, or was it like a slow pressure?
No pressure, but so the owner of Atlantic Vacation Homes is Carol Sheroff, who is my stepmother. And we'd always talked about how great it would be to work together. And I came in several years ago, I think 5 or 6 now, as a person to take over the marketing. And there was a fairly seamless transition in that regard, since it was utilizing a lot of the skills that I had been using up to that point.
I think that's really neat that you said you had always wanted to work with your mother. My mom is a scientist. She's a cognitive scientist at Hopkins. And I could never have imagined working with her because she specializes in an area that it could take me a lifetime to understand. But you kind of always had it in mind that mom's vacation rental / real estate business was something that you would like to be a part of, huh?
Hey, this is the coolest industry around. So yeah.
Yeah, it is. That's someone coming from tech. By the way, did you just see that Jack from Twitter told all of his employees that they can work at home permanently?
Ooh.
Yeah, that came out yesterday. What do you make of that? That's going to start something of a trend, no?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole cost savings, right? If you don't have to maintain the same amount of building space for your employees.
Hmm.
So sure, if it works. Obviously, not every industry can do that, and we can't clean a vacation rental property from home. So
Yes.
there's some things that translate and some things that don't.
Well, thank you for getting me back on track because I would have just continued rambling about non vacation rental things. But like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of episode. There are certain topics that I do mull over, but I don't really talk about a whole lot because I consider myself kind of a cheerleader most of the time. And the cheerleader for the industries doesn't like shout at the other team, you suck. The cheerleader roots and says positive things. But that doesn't mean that these things aren't happening beneath the surface. And I was thinking we could go through some of them that I've been mulling over. And one of the first one that comes to mind for me, Michelle, which I'm kind of curious for your input on, has to do with our margins. So you talked about how our industry is a very hands-on, time-intensive one. We're notoriously slim on our margins, maybe not as slim as restaurants, let's say, who are really struggling with this pandemic. But I haven't yet come across a consistent kind of model that has large margins, and I get concerned sometimes that managers are being spread thin. How do you guys see your margins at Atlantic Vacation Homes, maybe as it compares to the rest of the industry? And is it dangerously slim, or is it necessary, do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So when you look at the business as a whole, I think margins, yeah, they can be slim and getting slimmer, especially when you look at the amount of software that you need and the OTA costs and all of those things.
Oh, yes.
But there are certain areas that can have more margin than others. And that's where, people need to look at what they're able to offer and at what cost. So for instance, we have a grocery delivery service, and that's something that I expect, especially this summer, will be in high demand. The margin there is better than, say in other areas.
Oh,
So
so how does that work? Somebody types in what they want, and someone on your team goes to the supermarket. And what makes that different from one of these app things?
So we have come up with specific packages to make it a little bit easier on our end.
Cool.
We don't necessarily have the time or wherewithal to shop for, some specific organic blah 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 brand of
Right.
exotic tofu or something. But we have a list, so a standard set of packages that there's the cookout pack or the day one starter pack that people can choose from and maybe make substitutions if it's pretty reasonable for a cost, but really that's those types of services, and being able to think a little bit more outside of the box of what else you can offer can both enhance the guest experience but then also help with the margin piece.
I love that one. Are there other kinds of services that you have seen that have that kind of hidden value? Because I think most people listening to this are like, huh, never thought about that. But I'm guessing there's other little pockets that people could tap.
Sure. I mean, it's really anything and everything within your business. You have to be able to look at it from a financial perspective.
Hmm.
So, whether it is in the cleaning or laundry, there's a lot of companies of a certain size that have their own laundry facilities. So,
Right.
they're able to build in that margin when they charge for cleaning or charge for, owner linen cleaning. It just depends on what the resources you have are
Hmm.
and what's available to you and how you can make that margin increase or as needed.
And so, what would if we were to flip this and start asking ourselves how we could reduce overhead, because that's another thing a lot of people are sort of realizing that their overhead was quite high, especially in this time. Are there certain things that you look at on a regular basis and you kind of make an audit kind of assessment in terms of stuff that you're using that's working and stuff that's not?
It's really the flip side of the coin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at everything, whether that's software or I did something the other day where essentially talking to a rep and I got a nice good guy discount, if you've ever heard that phrase.
No.
What can you do on this product and this service? So ask those kinds of questions.
Good guy discount. I love that.
Yeah.
They need a good gal discount. This is actually a perfect little segue into one of the other things I've been wondering about lately, and that is diversity. Whenever I attend a vacation rental conference, it's like 99.5% white people between the ages of 45 and 70. This is not a diverse group. And yet, the vast majority of the traveling public are potential guests, that is to say. That, of course, is a much more diverse group. Do you think about often how we can better represent the general public as independent owners and managers? Is that way more than just an easy answer here?
Well, for me personally, I am a woman of color, so yeah, I think about it quite a bit. There's a lot of historical reasons. I think when you look at who has access to be able to even start a company, who has the means to do that, or has the education level to do that, has the funding to do that, versus when you look at diversity within more of the back of house operations, right? The housekeepers and maintenance people, there's a lot more diversity, I think, in those segments than in the leadership of companies. And that's not to say that there isn't any, obviously,
right.
But yeah, so it's a little bit of a loaded question. But I think there's a lot that could be done in terms of looking at that next generation of people coming up in colleges or in high schools. Look at internship programs. There's a lot that we could be doing to recruit at, for instance, historically Black colleges, or there's definitely more that we can be doing, and people looking within the community to see if the staff in your office, is it reflective of your community?
Yeah, I also tend to think that diversity is doesn't seem like something that people have avoided intentionally at all. It seems like simply something that they haven't really thought about at all. So maybe the first kind of step in that right direction is just beginning to think about how we make our teams more diverse, how we share that diversity with our prospective guests. Because would you agree that if we stay sort of, if we only look like one kind of host, not only will other people not see themselves in our business, but also with guests, like I wouldn't be attracted to a business that doesn't reflect my life.
There's a lot of unconscious bias in the world, and that's natural. And there's a reason that it's called unconscious, right? People don't necessarily realize it when they're interviewing or looking for people to join their teams. It's very natural to gravitate toward people that are like you, right? Mm-hmm. The best piece of hiring advice that I ever ran across was in a sort of HR. It was not for this industry, but there was a HR segment at a conference I was attending, and the person that was leading it said, don't hire for culture fit, hire for culture add. And I just thought that was so profound.
Yeah, I love that.
You want to add somebody who's going to bring more to the table and bring different ideas to the table, different experience.
I'm just writing that down. I really like that. So many managers get started accidentally, and that accidental nature is actually one of the most beautiful aspects of our industry. But Stuart, you know what's not beautiful when it has an accident?
What's that, Matt?
Your revenue, or your guests, or the properties that you manage. And for that, we have Rental Guardian. I don't know why I gave that a strange foreign accent. They deliver best-in-class travel protection, damage protection, and liability protection for over 600 managers throughout the world. That is a whole lot of bad accidents removed. In addition, Rental Guardian recently launched Master Cancel, which basically lets you offer flexible terms and conditions to your guests while simultaneously protecting the hard-earned revenue that you and your owners have earned. I like to think that Rental Guardian takes care of all the bad accidents for us so we can focus on the good accidents, although I don't think they'd put that on their website. You can head over to rentalguardian.com to learn more and find out for yourself. You need a Rental Guardian. Along these same lines of lacking diversity, I also feel that oftentimes when I look across our industry, and in all fairness, the people who are listening to this podcast and the people that do attend these events do represent a very advanced sector of the broader vacation rental market. But on average, I don't see a ton of vacation rental businesses with a social responsibility initiative baked in. In some cases, it's kind of maybe done but not articulated. In other instances, it's certainly never thought about before. You ever get concerned that without something like that really built in a deliberate way, we're missing out?
I think there are actually a lot of companies that do socially good things. There's also a tendency for some to maybe not toot their own horn about it, or not have it as part of their marketing or their website. So it's easy to look at a company that they may not think to put it on their website because that they have teams that go in every week to volunteer in whatever that community event is that they're contributing to. But maybe it's something they do as team building, but they just never thought to put it on their website. So people should do it more and should announce it and make that part of their just announcing, this is who we are as a company. When we have these values where we support our community, and that's part of our DNA, and people should know that.
Yeah, Audrey Miller, who I think is up in your neck of the woods, she thinks she's in Maine. She has been for years simply putting out nicely branded paper bags, grocery bags, and collecting groceries that were left over by guests and delivering them to the local food bank. Thousands and thousands of pounds of groceries that Audrey is donating, and occasionally she shares it on her social feed and with her former guests. But every time I mention that to someone, they're like, oh, that's a really good idea. We always have leftover ingredients too. So it may also be one of those things that just getting it part of the conversation gets people starting to think about it a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And we do that as well. We leave a bag that has instructions on it for the guest, and anything that's left over and unopened and non-perishable, we drop off with the food bank.
You see, you weren't even going to mention that to me.
It's hard to toot my own horn.
Environmental aspects as well. There's a couple Inner Circle members in our VRMB community who are just full-time working on their environmental efforts. Bob Gardner jumps off the page to me, somebody who has electric car chargers. He has all glass bottles, refuses any plastic. He has a program where he has teamed up with the best restaurants in town, each of whom give his guests 10% off their total bill. That money, that difference, is then given to Bob to plant trees. And they have planted like forests and forests of trees to offset the impact of the travel. But environmental things, perhaps there's some easier things that people can do. Don't have to go out and build your entire scheme. Have you guys thought through like green energy plans and things like that?
In properties, no, not necessarily. And it's hard because we work with obviously a lot of different homeowners, and we don't have a lot of influence to say things like, oh, you should get solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can make recommendations, but to a point. Within our office, yes, we're always trying to find different ways that we can save. One of my personal campaigns, I guess, is to have everybody turn off their monitors at night if they're not shutting down the computer. It's just like those little things
Yeah.
that can add up.
Like we do, like in our houses, we turn out the lights, we turn off the monitor. Good practice. Along these lines of sort of, I don't want to call them shortcuts, but it's perhaps easier ways. I think the vacation rental industry, especially over the last few years with the rise of these listing sites, has bred a certain kind of individual who's looking for a short or quick return. And one of my concerns is that because I don't think those individuals are necessarily in it for the hospitality. They're not in it for the long run. And that can sort of compromise the hospitality component when a guest is staying and they're not being treated properly. But the other sort of slippery slope that I've noticed is in commoditization, or is it commodification? Basically turning your vacation rental into a commodity and sort of losing it of any identity or soul, which is a very easy thing to do, especially as a lot of companies are looking to scale. Do you see this same sort of trend, or at least temptation, towards that quick and or generic movement that could be potentially getting away from our roots?
I think you're absolutely right. And the OTAs certainly facilitated that and made it easy for pretty much anyone to just jump in and start, thinking that they're going to just be printing money.
Yeah.
A lot of people do realize pretty quickly that it's harder than it seems. And yeah, I do worry about that. And it sort of depends. I think going back to what you were saying before about different constituencies throughout the industry, there are certainly homeowners of ours even, who think about their property as more of, an investment, or not necessarily a commodity in that sense, but they are using it as a way to provide income.
Mm-hmm.
For other homeowners of ours, it's a family home that maybe was in their home for generations, and they want to pay the taxes on it, but they're not necessarily looking for, just income from it in that sense. So it depends on who you're talking about. But part of what's okay, I guess, about the segment of our homeowners who are looking at it as more of an investment, we do the hospitality part. Right. So Atlantic Vacation Homes, that's what we do, and we excel at that, and we're able to do that with their property. When you have a property manager, or whether they have a lot of properties or just a couple of properties, if they are only looking at it as that investment and not really thinking about the guest experience and not thinking about how to make their guests comfortable, then yeah, they're probably not going to be in business very long.
And how do we deal with these? I call them bad actors in the worst instances, but in the other instances, it's just really bringing down the average of the group. So I talk to a lot of friends who are going to travel, and they don't have any contacts in any given destination. They don't run in vacation rental circles like we do. And they are kind of gambling. It's a bit of a crapshoot when they're going to stay. And if they have a bad experience, they write off our entire industry. I've heard them. A lot of it's through Airbnb, but a lot of times it's just a completely unprofessional, unprepared manager. How do we as the responsible ones deal with that?
Probably several prongs. One is obviously the book direct movement, and the more that we can promote booking direct and really encourage visitors and guests to understand your company and the personality of your company, kind of what we were talking about before, right? What is the company's values? What's the DNA? What is it going to be like to be a guest of this company or that company? When things are listed on OTA sites, it has been great for that billboard effect and really being able to see, okay, here's a variety of different properties, but it's, aside from pictures, it's really hard to differentiate between them.
Yeah.
So if we can educate more, and a lot of travelers don't understand that Airbnb doesn't own properties. VRBO doesn't own properties, and they're not the ones providing that guest experience. The more that we can educate on that, I think the better.
And how would you endorse clamping down on bad actors as us stakeholders in that same block or neighborhood?
That's a good question. In some ways, what we're going through right now with the COVID situation is probably going to shake up a lot of the either the bad actors or the people who are not prepared to do things in a professional way.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, for those businesses, I think we're going to see a lot of disruption coming out of this. And the companies that are doing the good work and are really prepared to come out of this in a way that can benefit everybody, I think we're going to see some shakeup.
Yeah, you said that very eloquently. I was going to say a cleanse almost of the businesses that really were not rooted firmly or doing things properly. And conversely, I've noticed that the folks who really were practicing meaningful small business stuff and building relationships and building their brand, they have managed to weather this. It's not fun by any means, but they've kept their head above water, and they're prepared to restart when travelers are ready again. But this kind of segues into another. I feel like this is almost like a shrink. I'm sharing with you all my concerns about the industry. It leads into one of my other concerns that I stay up at night thinking about, and that is the dependency on OTAs. We talk a little bit about the ease of just putting your property up, and that describes a vast majority of the folks on that end of the spectrum who are going for a quick win. But what about the managers who receive 95% of their bookings through one OTA? And that one OTA, won't use any names here, but like Airbnb, for instance, decides to completely throw them under the bus and refund all travelers across the board. That's not a sustainable business practice. That very well may put you out of business. How do you think about the dependency thing?
Well, yeah, this is a topic that I've certainly been thinking about since I came into the industry, which was just before the OTAs really started flipping the script about how they were operating and how they expected us to operate with them. A number of years ago, they were advertising. That was it. You could pay for a listing, get a subscription, put yourself out there, and it was just one more way to attract guests, right? And then over time, this e-commerce model and trying to compete with, Amazon and other similar companies, trying to compete with Google, really led to that commoditization of the industry and the properties in the industry. So that suddenly you had our properties being just thought of as sort of inventory and fodder for the OTA listings without much thought to what are the differences between these properties, and really with no education on what makes vacation rentals different. And that's been a concern of mine. It's one thing to try to go after a lot of new markets and bring people into vacation rental travel who have not done it before. But if you're not really setting the expectation,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just presenting vacation rental properties alongside hotel rooms, for instance, without talking about what those differences are, it could lead to misexpectations on the part of the guests, certainly, and not understanding. So I think it's led to a lot of frustration.
Totally. I mean, on behalf of the owners too, even in Brian Chesky's little video town hall thing that he did, I don't know if you saw that, but it was a very strange mix of and it was to the hosts. It was a very strange mix of, we are a community, we are a group, everybody has their rights, and we want to, represent everybody, and the role of a CEO in a business who's making decisions with his investors. And I found it to be very conflicting. And I really do find that people who are so furious with Airbnb at this moment, it's just a deeper kind of fury than that they've been experiencing over the years, because they really have gotten themselves into this kind of dependency. And it doesn't really help to just be pointing fingers and shouting and claiming that the OTA has done you wrong. I'm hoping that these kinds of incidents are the harsh lessons that folks need to get more non-dependent. And I'm not saying independent, because we got to use these listing sites and all tools really to the best of our ability. I mean, there are more tools around for us today to run our vacation rental businesses than your mom, which early on in the business probably could have ever imagined. Mm-hmm. But we can't be controlled by those tools. We can't let those tools define our lives. Do you think that there may be a new mindset shift as this pandemic has shook up the way we view our tools and partners?
I think so. And really, nobody should be using any just one OTA. If you're going to use any, it doesn't make sense to put all your eggs in a single basket anyway, right? So as with stock portfolio, right? Diversify.
Yeah.
Diversification in all things.
With our listing site non-dependence platform, we show a table with one leg, and we say, this is your first listing site. You love it. So you get 3 more legs, and now your table is more sturdy. But then you realize that table is actually only one leg of a much bigger table. Now you are the sturdiest with a diverse marketing portfolio. And people get a little bit of perspective there and stop associating success, quote unquote, with their Airbnb bookings. This dependency and this pointing the finger is especially agitated in moments like right now, when we have advocacy issues, when the livelihood of a business, Florida, I'm sure you're fully plugged into that, is taking place. And advocacy and the fact that we don't really have super singular and strong voices in any given destination, not to just write off the amazing groups who are doing stuff. Those are the best groups that we've got. But on average, across the country and the world, we don't have these groups. Is that weakness of sort of teamwork and collaboration going to be our downfall?
Well, no, I don't think there will be a downfall. I think there's more collaboration now than ever before. People are starting to band together, and even with the pandemic, right? More people are together online, on Zoom meetings. It's easier to collaborate in a way that we just hadn't been doing before. So I think there's hope. And certainly the VRMA has been very active in the Florida situation and really government affairs all across the board, and really trying to be a leader in making sure that the rules are fair for everybody and can be applied with common sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is a huge leap, really, from where it used to be. They've made huge progress.
Exactly.
This is kind of leads me into my last main genre of questions, which is finding that balance between individuality, which we sort of pride ourselves in, and standards across the board, so that travelers can, on average, expect and get something consistent. What do you think that mix looks like?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've thought about over the years, certainly. And from a consistency standpoint, it would be good to have, and we're starting to have more of cleaning standards, things like that. Again, VRHP and VRMA are trying to help lead the charge in formulating some of that and be able to give advice and recommendations. It's, we don't want necessarily different government entities telling us what those standards should be, right? They should be informed by the actual companies and by people that understand the industry and know how to operate within the industry. So there's that.
What do you see as, I mean, one of the things that I look at it, like, where is the actual activity happening right now? Where's the most progress being made already? And I see these local short-term rental alliances who are doing remarkable work mobilizing their stakeholders in those areas. Is there a way that those kinds of groups can be working together more often, both, I guess, internally, the individuals in any given destination, but also across the country, that maybe aren't of the property manager of VRMA caliber, that are more just like maybe a single property owner? Is there kind of collaboration avenues that you think work best?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, anyone with a good idea on that front certainly should speak up, and it's easy to, well, easy, right? But to start with your community and start with the people who are around you, whether that's in your state or if you're in a specific region, and move in those concentric circles. That's probably the easiest way to really do it, is you really start locally, and then you're able to start talking to other local areas and say, hey, what do we have in common? How do we collaborate? How do we push this forward together?
Do you guys collaborate with your fellow vacation rental companies up there?
We do. Yeah, there's certainly people that we talk to that are in different areas, like on Cape Cod or in Maine. And there's a New England VRMA group that meets in the late fall. We're always looking for good ideas, and how do we share our ideas? How do we learn from others? It's all networking. It's all good.
And speaking of good ideas, I always like to ask, in terms of technology, you of course have your background in technology, so I'm guessing you're using some fun tools at the business. In this crisis, a lot of people have done a bit of a tech audit and decided that some tools they could do without, but there's other tools that they could not do without that are central to their business. Would you mind sharing one or two of those that you guys just really consider like to be part of the operational process?
Sure. I mean, we definitely have we use Escapia as our PMS system, and that's, I think, a foundational tool for any company, having a PMS system for any company that's doing all the things that a vacation rental business does, at least as a starting point, if you're managing multiple properties, for sure. And we've been using a tool called Breezeway to manage our operational tasks, if you will. So scheduling cleaning, scheduling maintenance on properties, inspections, etc. And it is kind of like a ticket system, so that we can say to person A, here's a task for you, please do that task in this property at this time. And it can tell us when it was started, when it was completed, if there's any notes attached to it. So that's been very helpful.
Okay, we have to do a shout out to Breezeway, because they are mentioned in almost every single interview that we ever do. And after a little bit of pressure, they're also now the sponsor of this podcast. So let's throw in the advertisement there. Breezeway's property care and services platform eliminates the headaches for property managers. There's a lot of work that goes into coordinating quality, safety, and cleanliness across your properties. And even if you have a fantastic staff, communicating exactly what you expect and ensuring that it gets done right, that is a tricky thing. Breezeway is a tool that empowers you to automate these operations and ultimately deliver an amazing rental experience every time. Head over to breezeway.io to learn more. And it wouldn't be fair to talk about technology that frees up your time to focus on higher value human tasks without mentioning Point Central, the leader in business grade smart property solutions designed for vacation rental properties. Point Central's technology does some really cool stuff. Keyless access, means you're eliminating the risk and the costs and the sheer annoyance factor of old school mechanical keys. By reducing energy costs and extending the lifespan of your HVAC equipment. By increasing your security with driveway and doorbell cameras and making sure that you can access all of this on a mobile or a desktop device. This ability to real-time control all your properties from anywhere, this is a futuristic thing that is available now. Head over to pointcentral.com/VRMB to learn more. We're noticing a new wave of vacation rental professionals entering both a little bit pre-COVID, the last year or so, but also right now, getting an incredible amount of people asking questions and wanting to start their vacation rental businesses pretty much in the middle of this crisis. What kind of advice do you give to somebody like that who wants to do it properly, is not necessarily looking for the overnight success? What do they need to know before really investing themselves in this industry?
Oh, that's a good question. So one is having a basic understanding of hospitality and what that means, right? So that's one piece. And are you talking about somebody that has maybe just one property or is looking to manage multiple properties?
Yeah, maybe they know somebody who has an extra home that they're thinking about turning into a vacation rental, or they've seen all this wonderful success in the industry and they want to start right off the bat with a handful of properties. So they don't really have any experience in hospitality or this kind of business in general.
Okay, yeah. I mean, certainly joining organizations like VRMA, or I know you have your inner circle, and being able to learn from peers in the industry is huge. And that certainly helped me starting to go to conferences and just learning from other people and absorbing all the great information that is out there and the educational opportunities. That cannot be condensed into a book. There's just so much good stuff out there. But also, too, my advice might be a little different. If somebody owns properties and they are renting out those even if it's multiple properties, if they're the owner, there's certain things that are just going to be very different from if you are managing properties that belong to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another whole piece. And when you think about client services, right? A property manager that is renting on behalf of other homeowners, really we have different clients, right? Different constituencies. So we have our guests, but we also have our homeowners, and we have to balance making everybody happy and making us happy as well. So that takes a different set of skills and a different set of just things that, overhead and supplies and all that. You can do different things when it's just your properties.
And somebody who is entering now, or who has been sort of preparing over the last year and getting ready to really ramp it up, we can't end this conversation without talking a little bit about pretty much the entire new world that is ahead of us on the operational front, making safe vacation homes that don't have coronavirus in them. I mentioned at the beginning of the pod that you had that wonderful discussion with Tim and Sarah, in which you outlined a lot of the details. But can you just give us kind of like a high-level overview of the changes that are going to need to be made on our managerial side moving forward, at least things that people should begin thinking about without getting you into the weeds?
Sure. The biggest thing to remember with this is that once travel really starts to open up, you have to think about where people are coming from and where they're traveling from, and understanding that while some areas may be at little risk at the moment, there are other areas that are at higher risk where the virus has been hitting more across the board, right? So Boston in Massachusetts has been hit more, with this than maybe some other more rural areas in the country, right? And same, New York has obviously had it very bad.
Mm-hmm.
So as we open up, if you have people that are coming from some of these areas, right, and going to your area, You don't know. And there's so much asymptomatic transmission.
Mm-hmm.
And this is true. I mean, even within these other communities, right? People can have it and not know it. And my understanding is that people are the most contagious in those days before they become really symptomatic. So you almost have to think about every property as having it because you don't know. So that's one. And then two, there's been, I know, a lot of discussion and controversy about the time frames. And in the VRHP guidelines, we're very careful. We can't mandate and tell people what to do, right? We don't have that kind of authority. We are putting out recommendations based on what we know about the science. And the science essentially says that the respiratory droplets, if the virus is in the respiratory droplets, those settle to the ground in about 3 hours.
Which is just crazy. How is it possible that a respiratory droplet is hanging there? How's that possible?
Well, if you've ever been outside on a cold day and you see your breath, right? That's it.
Yeah.
And you're breathing out into your space all day long. So it takes about 3 hours for the virus to fall because it's heavier, than the air, I guess. So it takes a while for it to fall, and so there's this air component. And then if the virus is on surfaces, depending on the surface, it takes longer to degrade. So it can take up to 24 hours for the virus to degrade off of cardboard and paper, and it's longer, up to 72 hours for hard plastics and certain metals. And the CDC has said that after about a full week, it's completely died off. So the longer you can wait from a scientific standpoint, the better, right? If you really want to make sure that every single virus particle is completely dead, you would want to wait that full week. However, from a business process perspective, that's not feasible, especially for a lot of companies that have back-to-backs booked all summer long, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, it becomes a conversation around protective equipment and how much protective equipment do you need? And if we're talking about going in less than 3 hours after a departure, we're talking about goggles for your eyes. Obviously have the masks, have the gloves, but think about eye protection as well because of that air exposure. And after the 3 hours, if it's probably safer to not have the goggles, but you still are going to want to have your masks and your gloves. And you want to make sure you're using a good COVID rated disinfecting agent on surfaces, particularly the high touch surfaces that, may not have always been hit before. Every single light switch, every single doorknob, every single remote control, every, drawer pull, front of the microwave, like all these different areas that may not have had quite that much attention before.
My head is spinning just thinking about all these things. I'm looking around my room at all the different areas that would need to be cleaned. This is going to mean significantly more work for cleaning staffs and significantly more precautionary measures and personal protection equipment for the operational side. Is there at any point where this mountain gets too hard to climb? Back to our slim margins conversation, is this getting close to being impossible?
I don't think it's impossible, but you really have to look at what you can do and what you can do in what time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, for those back-to-backs, especially, we are looking at changing the arrival and departure times. So we've always had a 10 a.m. departure time and a 3 p.m. arrival time, but we're going to be changing that and having more like a 9 and 5 o'clock time frame to really allow more time for each of those cleanings.
What do you think a vaccine will do to this discussion we're having right now?
Well, that is the $64 million question. And that's the game changer that I think everybody's waiting for. But until then, we don't know. And it's hard. It's even, there's a lot of talk about taking people's temperatures and, don't come to work if you're symptomatic and things like that. But again, by the time people are symptomatic, they could have had it for several days. So, and spreading it around in that time, there's no way to know. And it's that uncertainty. You don't want to, it's one thing to have a risk for yourself personally, but when you're talking about risking employees, risking guests, risking homeowners, you really have to think hard about what you're doing.
It's just crazy. I mean, I sold my vacation rental business 3 years ago, so I'm not in a position in which I need to be implementing all of these things. But the vacation rental business itself to begin with was really hard. And now it's
Mhm.
like this, it's ramped up this entirely new level. And my hope is that our colleagues can rise to that level and that they can kind of ride the trend that we've been noticing, which is travelers wanting a standalone, pretty much home instead of staying in a traditional hotel. And that if you are able to supply this kind of product, you almost might have a newfound place in the future of travel. Is I'm guessing you're championing that vacation rental positioning story too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm feeling pretty hopeful, and I think vacation rentals really are going to see a new appreciation within the travel industry, especially for people who do want to have a kitchen and be able to manage their own food, or have their own washing machine in the property. They don't have to rely on shared spaces in a hotel, for instance. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of that shift, and the companies that can do well and provide good service and still be able to provide a very clean and sanitized experience, they're going to do well.
Yeah, I think both cleaning procedures, and let's give a shout out to, is it Safe Home? Is that the branded logo?
Safe Home Initiative. Yep.
Safe Home Initiative. How long did that take to make? By the way, it seems like it took the last like 25 years because it's so complete. Not because you took a long time to actually produce it. That was not what I was trying to say. But it is a really comprehensive document, and it's basically a branded thing by the VRMA and VRHP of guidelines that any manager can be using. And again, like Michelle says, not telling you how to do your cleaning, but giving you really good ideas. That thing must have taken some time, Michelle.
It did take a bit of time, and it started coalescing just in a bunch of different conversations. So by the time we actually put pen to paper, it was sort of half together anyway, and there'd already been so many conversations. Well, what should we do about this, and what should we do about that? And uh, Dirk Johnson, who's the executive director for VRHP, has been fantastic, and he is a wealth of
Yes,
knowledge
he is.
and really did a lot of the research and was able to bring to the table a lot of the science. And he got in there and read those articles, the journals, uh, New England Journal of Medicine, all those things, to really understand the science. So we definitely couldn't have done it without him. But everybody in the council participated and reviewed, provided feedback. So it was a team effort, and the VRMA has been great in putting together the platform for sharing the information and really being able to get it out there into everybody's hands. So team effort all around.
Team effort all around. Shout out to Dirk. When we interviewed Dirk for the podcast, it was a couple of seasons ago. He afterwards he popped open a little a little cooler, and he showed me that some bacteria that he was carrying. So I was like, okay, this guy knows his stuff. So shout out to that entire team, and congrats again. That's something that is so important to have, kind of a lighthouse of best practices, or at least something that can be recognized by people, for everybody to work towards. Michelle, we're nearing the end of this interview. This has been very cathartic for me. I'm sorry if I've sounded like I was venting. I try to avoid negative talk all the time, so this is like my overcompensation for all of that. I'd like to ask you one last question. Have you got a wish for our industry moving forward?
Oh, that's a good question. And I only get one wish. I can't
You,
wish for more wishes.
you can have no, you cannot wish for more wishes.
Oh, it's a really good question.
You got the magic wand.
How about I wish that, oh, there's so many good possibilities. So I'm going to wish that everybody's direct booking campaigns all work like gangbusters and we can all achieve our non-dependence.
Yeah. It doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well, but it's more accurate. And I do have to, I love that one, by the way. I've been rooting for people's non-dependence now for quite some time as well. I do have to give a shout out to the person to whom I originally asked that wish question, which planted in my mind for future interviews. And that was your mother, Carol.
Well,
and we got to give her a little shout out, right? Can't go this podcast without mentioning her. She's wonderful. Michelle, this has been really, really lovely. And thank you, Michelle, for your time. You are a wonderful leader in our industry. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with you one of these days when the travel bans subside.
Likewise. Thanks, Matt.
I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I did having it. The episode was produced by Tammy Rowe and Stuart Hooper of Mango Fish Studios. Our intro song is The Moon of Pajang by Instant Party. And if you feel inspired, please consider sharing to social media with your big takeaway. We love takeaways. They make us feel great. Lastly, if you want to receive updates, you can do so at vrmb.com/mmm. And if you want to join our virtual community of vacation rental professionals, become a member of VRMB's Inner Circle today. Until next time.